Hello guys and welcome to another PCG tutorial. Today we're going to take a look at how I made this PCG assets from scratch. So we're going to spawn only the grass on top, and we got some vines hanging off the cliff here that only spawns underneath, and we got some other kinds of vines only spawning on flat surfaces. So not on top or not underneath. And we're not spawning any flat vines on top here because it's more probable to spawn from the bottom up. And you can see we got some vines underneath here as well, and we can easily remove them maybe in the next tutorial or something. But yeah, let's get started. Start with creating a PCG graph by right-clicking in the content browser and then name it something amazing. After you created your graph, simply drag it into the world. So here you can see the bounding box and you got your properties on the right here. So on the left here we have our finished PCG asset, and let's keep that so we can compare that to the work in progress. When you drag your PCG asset into the world, I usually set it to 1. So to my right here I got my PCG graph, and you can get that by double clicking your PCG you just created. And then you'll start with an input and an output node. You can see that I got some other nodes here, and that's because I prepared this tutorial. So I think it's better for me to actually talk about how to get this done instead of like writing in numbers and so on. So we'll go through exactly how I made this, but I prepared some nodes. So you can see that I actually don't have anything connected to the input or the output nodes. And that's because some of these nodes, like the static mesh spawner, can actually spawn stuff without being connected. So the input-output nodes we will mainly be using for subgraphs in future videos. So I'll just disable these guys for now, and let's talk about the first node. So you can enable debug with D, and you can enable the inspect with A now. They changed it from earlier versions. So we only have one point here, and that's because I set the active filter to self. So it's getting the data from the world actor and the location in the world. And you also have other options as well. You can set it to include children, and I set this to get single point. The default I think is parse actor components. So if I move the actor in the world, you can see that the position changes. So it's basically the actor position in the world. So you also have E for enable. So then I got a bounce modifier, which you can see is pretty much the shape of the Megascans asset. And I actually just set these values manually. I think you can do it procedurally, or I know you can do it procedurally, but yeah, I just set it manually for now. So you can just copy these values. And let's see what Megascan assets I actually used so you can follow along. Yeah, so if you just copy these WDE ID and search in the bridge, Quickset bridge up in tools, and then you just search for it, WDE, yes. And then you download it, and I set this to nanite as well. As you can see here on the right, it's nanite supported. Perfect. Also, don't forget to set the bounce modifier mode to set, so it overwrites the previous value. Then we got a transform point, which sets the scale to 1, which is unnecessary, so I don't really know why I have this. But then we actually spawn the mesh. So you can see here on the right that I got the static mesh from Megascans in the mesh entries. So just press this plus button, so you can spawn vines on any mesh. I forgot to mention that, I think. And if you're spawning multiple meshes, make sure to use this PCG instance packed attribute thing, because then it makes instances, or in short, it's good for performance. And I would think it's better to have this enabled than not. So now to the cool stuff. So here we have a mesh sampler, which is connected to copied points, and we're going to talk about both. The mesh sampler spawns points basically on a mesh. So we selected the same mesh here, and you can see that we got Poisson sampling as well. But nothing happens when we enable this, because this spawns the points at the origin. So we have to move the points to the right location. That's our static mesh spawner location. So that's what we use the copy points for. So when we enable the copy points, you can see, yeah, points on our surface basically. But if I enable the debug flag on the mesh sampler and go to the origin, we can see the shape of our mesh at the origin, but nothing here until we enable the debug flag on copy to points. So we simply move the points from the origin to our mesh, so it aligns perfectly. Also worth mentioning, I got this set to Poisson sampling, which is not the default. And you can see my sampling radius and my settings here. So just yeah, just copy it or play around with it. Then we got a bounce modifier, which extends each point. So it creates overlapping with other points, and we can simply remove them with the next node, which is the self-pruning node, which we did in another tutorial if you look at my channel, if you want the more basics.